But yeah, you've had a really like interesting, like rounded like life, and like I mean you're young still as well, so it's like you've done so much and experienced so much, like growing and to where you are now. So you've kind of said you've had two forks in your road almost.
Had many in between, but I'd say those were the
two major
real crisis points.
Yeah. So speaking on like the first fork, which is like your parents splitting that you mentioned before, how did you go about like not blaming yourself? Because you did mention that there was a lot of like blaming yourself, like I caused this. How did you move from there to where you are now, looking back and seeing that you actually didn't play a part in any?
It's really interesting because that is, especially that one, has not only really found a resolution or healing until very recently in my last year. Like I'm talking this year.
I was going to ask you, do you talk to
with
both
therapy?
your parents?
No, like through therapy.
Yeah, okay.
I actually, I'm a huge advocate for therapy, psychology and counseling and stuff. Like you don't even have to be in crisis. Like right now I still see my therapist and it's just to check in. Yeah. It's having someone there to be able to, and it's not a friend and you feel like it's not a burden. You're paying for their services. Trust me, you're paying.
It's like why wait until you're sick to go
That's
to,
correct.
That's true.
Correct. It's like having a healthcare check. And for anyone that's like feeling like they don't know where to start, go to your GP because you get 10 mental health care sessions for free from the government.
Nice.
That's how
I didn't even know that.
Thank you.
That's
how I got linked in. The Australian government, the system here, we really, really advocate for mental health. So you're supported just from having a Medicare card and you're supported. Wow. And we're so rich compared to other countries. Yeah. As you know, you've traveled around. Like there are no other countries that have free healthcare like
crazy.
that.
Yeah, for sure.
So check in with your GP. Was it?
I was getting lost in your story.
I was like, mental health. No, and then so the fork in the road.
Yeah, your parents.
How'd you get past
Yeah, and I actually held a lot of that for a very, very long time. And I blamed myself, and it actually probably filtered into a lot of my other relationships, even into adulthood for a very, very long time. And I find that's quite common with us when we look at what's showing up in our adult lives, or like, it's like, why am I lashing out like that? Why am my emotions like that? You can actually, if you break it down and choose to reflect, one, it's incredibly uncomfortable. But once you decide to commit and have a look at the behaviors, you realize a lot of them are from your childhood. Yeah. A lot of them is like, oh, well, that happened to me because of that. It's like, I had this massive fear that everybody leaves. Right. My parents left. My mum literally left a state. And to a child that's 4 years old, that's the world. Yeah. When you have no access to your mum. From Melbourne to Sydney, it might now be like, it's just a flight, because it is. But as a kid, you don't have, you can't comprehend.
She's just gone.
Yeah, she's gone. And I was living with my grandma, and there was, not that my grandma wasn't a bad grandma, she wasn't my mum. So that was so super hard for me. So I held a lot of that. And then growing up, I just had this thing that everybody leaves, and that's just what I started developing and thinking. No one was to tell me I was wrong, because I'd go out and I'd validate that too. I'd look for that. So then when Gus died, that was like that thought, that belief system that everybody leaves was just like solidified. I was like, that's it. I'm alone. I'm independent and I got this, but there's nobody out there that's going to be able to be part of this, because I'm on my own. I've always got my own back. And it became this attitude that I developed, and I was super independent, but not in a really healthy way, because as humans, we need connection. We actually need people. We need family. We need friends. So that not blaming myself took a lot of work, and that could only happen as an adult self now, having the understanding and the reflection to go back there and go, it's not your fault. But I don't know, I could have maybe had that without the awareness for a very long time. It did. It carried on throughout school and everything. But I'm glad to say that now I have the humility to go back there and the understanding to be like, actually, my parents splitting up was not my fault. I wish that what you said, when it's like, I think you nearly went into like, maybe I talked to my parents. I wish my parents could have provided me that. But they loved me. They just didn't have the skills to be able to explain that to me.
Do you think it might be an Asian thing as well? Because like, for example, I have heaps of Asian friends. My girlfriend's Asian, all that stuff. And it's like, I know that
Shout out to the Asians.
Shout out to the Asians. But it's like, I know that the relationship between kid and parent is really different. Like, even when it comes to things like, physical touch and all that stuff. So like, as Arabs, it's like, if I see my friend's parents, it's like, oh, you you know, you hug them, you kiss their cheeks, all that. That's how we do it, right? Parents always like, it's very close relationships, all that kind of stuff. But I know like a lot of my Asian friends, like just to, you know, blanket statement, right? It's not like that. It's like parent, kid, right?
And that blanket statement has valid, like it's truthful in that sense. So Asian culture for us, it is very like we show emotion through other ways, like money. And if dad's gone out to work, it's a sign of love, but they might not ever say I love you. So for someone that, for me, I'm super empathic and I love you. For me to actually feel love, like, and my partner knows this now, it's like I need to hear it and I need it in gifts and I need it in cuddles and I need it in like touch. And for me, I just never, it was so hard because I never got that from my parents. And mental health is also a thing that's really not talked about in Asian communities, if at all. It's a shame if you have it. And again, not their fault, just culturally, no one's been educated in it.
No one knows different.
Correct. No one knows any different. So, you know, ignorance sometimes it's like it can hit a whole culture. And so I think that was really hard. Both parents loved me, but they weren't the people that I would go to if something was wrong emotionally, because they just couldn't provide that support.
Something cool that you mentioned. I have one of your captions here. I think it's not a caption. It's from your book coming up, so that's a little quick plug for that as well. We'll probably jump into that after, but it's an excerpt from the synopsis. So you said something along the lines of like, somehow before we can even come to terms with like, you know, grief and pain ourselves, like we form these calluses on our hearts and negative belief systems. So I found that really, really cool, because not a lot of us realize that we put that like almost Band-Aid and that what's the word I can use? That answer to the problem ourselves that might not actually be the correct reasoning. So when you said that when you were trying to, you know, learn how to deal with the pain of or not blame yourself for your parents you know, divorce and splitting up, like how do you go about like you know, removing that kind of excuse or reason that you've put, and you walk around with that for quite a while. So how does someone even go about removing that kind of
Because that's the thing. When I say calluses around our hearts, think about like what a callus is. It's a thickness in the skin, right? From going through too much, and then it ends up developing this layer over it to protect it. And in another way, it's almost like it's building your walls up high and not letting anyone in. So even when the right people come along, you've built your walls up so high that you're not even giving them a chance to let them in. That's you doing that. It's when people put out their hand and you're not even looking that way, so you can't even grab that hand for someone to lift you up. And that's what I find we do that when we don't have that awareness. When we're in pain, it's like sometimes we like to mull it, like because that's more comfortable than reaching out and seeking help, like the misery or the loneliness. And for me, like I became really identified to that story of, like I had said earlier, that independence. Like I don't know, I've got my own back and I've survived this much. Everybody can leave because I got me. And that just wasn't the right attitude for me to have to truly heal and to live a life of fruition as well. Like for me to really celebrate life, I had to take other people on that journey with me. And so it meant I had to remove the calluses by going back there, and that no one else is going to do that for me. That's my own work. I had to go back to my inner child. I had to go back to when I was 4 as an adult, and I was like, I had to then bring those memories back up of mum leaving. I had to bring those emotions up of my parents splitting up and feeling like it was my fault, to then retrain it and like I had to basically rewrite my own narrative. Going into the story and going, if I at my adult healthy self, what can I do in this memory to make it not so painful anymore? And so I had to go back to my memories and kind of forgive myself. I had to go back to my memories and be like, it's not your fault. I had to go back to my memories and say, you are good enough. Yeah.
Wow. Without cutting off in it, because I know all of us have got so many different questions, but still on this, like, so you said it's taken like up to basically recent before you've been able to do that, you know, like, so how, because there's a lot of like young kids dealing with a lot of these situations and these questions.
Especially with divorce, because like, it's crazy now, the statistics, like what, half of marriages?
1 in 3 or half.
And I don't know how many of those have kids, but
so like,
I'm sure a lot.
For someone like 17 or even 13 or 12, how can they even now, because they're still in the midst of the story now, you know, how can they deal with, you know what I mean?
If they're listening to this, then bless their hearts, because I think more than ever now though, we have so much access. Right? So start listening to these mindset podcasts, start listening to positive energy. Like the people that you surround yourself with matters.
Yeah.
Who you surround yourself with matters. So for me, like if I could have started this work earlier, oh gosh, I would.
Yeah.
But that being said, I think now is still early. Like there's no time like now. I could have blocked all of this out, and you see it in humans when they have a midlife crisis or when they're 50 or 60, and then they finally wake up and it's like, oh my God, there's so much work to be done. So like if you are now in that high school phase and there's so much going on between 13 and 18, there's not only school pressure, then there's friendship groups, and then you have a fight and you literally feel like things are the end of the world, and then your parents are divorcing or there's abuse in the family or drug and alcohol. There's so much going on right now. It feels like there's so much to deal with. But if you can silence all of that, and I think really tune into who you are and what you want out of life, like you will be undefeatable.
Yeah.
And anyone that is going through any of that, realizing that you're not alone.
Yeah.
Like I'm just sharing you a story now that's of someone that has gotten to the other side, which is why I'm writing the book. But it's like there is another side to it. There always is. It might be so heavy for you to lift up, or like for you to like try and see that light at the end of the tunnel. But it's like if you can just find whatever it is that's tiny little amount of faith, that's literally all you need, right? It's just a little bit of hope. That silver lining can get you through so much.
Yeah, for sure.
I was even going to mention, because I sort of, growing up not long ago, probably like 6 years ago, my parents also went through like a rough time where my dad was overseas, my mom was here, and they're kind of like, not a divorce because I haven't officially like done the divorce, but they've been separated and stuff. And it was kind of mostly hard on me. I have 4 other siblings, but they were able to detach themselves from the situation, whereas I was kind of dragged into it. So like my question for you would be, what role did your siblings play in it? Were you guys able to talk to each other about it, or was it kind of like something that you just felt alone?
Yeah. And I can really resonate with that exact story, because like I said, I have so many emotions. So I felt like I was really pulled into this divorce. And my brother is the polar opposite of me.
Is your brother older, younger?
Older by 2 years. And so the divorce happened at the same time of us both growing up. But how he dealt with it, detachment is a form of coping. Right? They just choose to not feel, but they are. It just comes out in different ways. So I felt like that was my brother, and he just went like really into school, and like it just didn't seem like it affected him. And then that affected me even more.
Especially seeing that.
Because I was like, why am I crying all the time? And why am I like, like just so much risk-taking behaviors. I did so much to try and like get attention in terms of like seeking what is going on. And my brother didn't have any of that. And that was really, really hard for me, because he wasn't someone that I could speak to. And then I have 2 younger sisters, but they were too young. Like the age gap between us was like 11 years. So that's really hard. It's really hard to have siblings that you're just dealing it with different ways. You guys are receiving messages and then also healing and trying to process that same information in really different ways. Eventually, I hope for you as well that you'll find comfort in eventually being able to talk about it. But until then, the thing is, if you're ready to talk about it but they're not, you're going to get resistance because you're not on the same page. And that happens with a lot of things. Eventually people will catch on. Maybe they never will. But you got to keep living your life and raising your standards and living your path, because the right people are going to intersect with that and really resonate with that. So you might not have the tightness or like being able to talk to your siblings about it, but you'll find it in a friend. It'll always show up in different ways. You'll find out in a partner or something, or like a cousin. Or a pet. Even like you'll be surprised like how much my dog has helped me, and like we said like joke about it or laugh about it, but it's like I'm serious. My dog is like really like you're never alone. You're never alone.